Welcome to Arkansas. We just lost power. Hi, good morning everyone. I hope you're having a good morning. This is going to be a quieter one because Wolf's asleep. We are more than halfway through September. Yay! I got to thinking, is there anything else I should do a video about? I'm starting with the Juvia's Place Hydrate and Restore Squalane Glow Oil. And yes, there is something else very important that happens to take place in September. And that is my mother's birthday. Now, it's not something I've necessarily celebrated much in the past 8-ish years because my mother passed away in 2016. 9 years. She passed away in October of 2016, which kind of puts a bummer on Halloween because my mom loved Halloween, which I know seems well, you don't know seems strange, but I know seems strange. But my mother loved Halloween. She loved seeing her nieces and nephews dressed up. She loved seeing me dressed up when I was a little girl. But I eventually grew out of such things. What is this? Oh, apparently we're doing El Maquillage today. My mom was born in 1949. He's an early boomer. My dad was born in 1941, so he's technically the silent generation. So I am an elder millennial, younger Gen X, born of a boomer parent and a something else parent. I was raised a little differently than a lot of my peers. My parents' friends' kids were all grown, and some of them babysat me occasionally, not very often. But this is mostly going to be about my mom. So she was born in 1949, which means she grew up in the 50s and went to high school in the 60s. And the 60s very much, was a time of change. And there was kind of two different Americas. There's actually several different Americas, but as far as we're concerned right now, there was two different Americas. And my mom very much belonged to the conformist side. She wore the beehive. I have the most beautiful pictures of her wearing a beehive. I will try to find one. She was the color guard captain. She will very much tell you she was not a cheerleader. She was in the color guard. There is a difference. She was the oldest of 4 children, but her brother died in infancy when he was a baby. I think he might even have been stillborn. I'm not entirely sure. Nobody talks about him at all. Just, I know Grandma had a baby boy, and that's all I know about him. He didn't live long. According to my mother, and I say it that way because Grandma denies this, when her brother was born and then died, Grandma kind of lost her stuff and stopped being a parent and stopped being a wife and just kind of stopped in general. And my mother took over that role, which means she got up at 4 or 5 or maybe even earlier in the morning to make her dad's lunch, because in the 50s and 60s, that was part of a wife's role. And my grandfather was an engineer. Now, what's really cool about this, so by the way, this is a slightly different, this is the Bare Minerals Complexion Rescue Bronzer. To me, it's more like a blush. So that's how I'm kind of using it. But yeah, she got up 4 or 5 in the morning to make sure my grandpa had his lunch ready. And then she got her younger sisters ready. And I always thought it was kind of cool. Her sisters were born, each one is 5 years apart. So my middle aunt is exactly 5 years younger than my mom. And my youngest aunt is exactly 10 years younger than my mom. I don't exactly know where the brother fits in. I think it's between my mom's middle sister and her baby sister, but I don't know for sure. Like I said, they don't talk about him. But yeah, mom kind of took over and she made sure grandpa got her. It had to be after my baby sister because mom was in junior high or high school. So she was older than 10. And once she got grandpa off to work, she got her baby sisters up and she got them ready for school. And then they walked to school. And while doing all this, mom was captain of the color guard. And she kept an almost perfect GPA. She tried to tell me when I was little she kept a perfect GPA while doing all this to kind of tell me that if I wanted to do performing arts, I needed to have a perfect GPA. But I've seen her grade cards, and it was not perfect. It was good, but it wasn't perfect. My mom was extremely smart, but that's a lot for anyone to deal with. I mean, having to be a parent and do some wifely chores and study and be captain of the color guard and be super popular. My mom was perfect. And she wasn't perfect, I think, because she just was born that way. She was perfect because that's what was expected of her. My grandma and grandpa they weren't harsh for their generation, but by today's standards, they were pretty harsh. And they expected a lot of her. And she did everything she possibly could to live up to that. And she succeeded. She actually ended up going to prom with one of my high school teachers, which was a little weird. They weren't close. They didn't date. They just went to prom. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, he loved my mother. And I never actually had him for class. He just taught at my high school. So it wasn't that weird. But it's just a little bit trivia. But yeah, my mom was fairly popular. She couldn't do a whole lot because her mother didn't drive and she wasn't allowed to learn to drive. So the family had one car and my grandpa worked long hours. I mean, he was an engineer. My grandpa never went to college, by the way. Back then, you could become an engineer just by being smart enough and studying on your own. And Lord knows, my grandpa was so smart. I didn't get to know him nearly as well as I wanted to because he died very young. At some point in his life, he had a liver problem. He didn't drink, he just had a liver problem. And they gave him some experimental medicine. And it helped him at the time, but it had some long-term side effects that basically destroyed his liver. And he ended up dying in 1991 when I was 8 years old of cirrhosis of the liver caused by these medicines. Did we ever get a payout? No, because he knew they were experimental and he signed paperwork. But the drugs developed because of these trials have saved lives. So that's kind of how I look at it, as it's awful that I lost my grandpa that young and my mom lost her dad that young and my grandma lost her husband, and all of that is awful. But my grandpa was a hero because he tried the drugs that ended up saving lives. And I was 8, so, there's some... I'll get to that. So when my mom graduated high school, her goal in life was to be a kindergarten teacher. Which, knowing my mom, she would not have made a good kindergarten teacher. She had patience for some things, and she did really love children. And I think she would have been fine as like a 4th, 5th, or 6th grade teacher. I just don't think kindergarten was the age she was meant to have. But regardless, she went to college. She went to Cal Poly Pomona in Southern California, and she made it all the way to her last year. But she got married. I'm skipping a part. I'll get to the marriage in a second. When she was in high school, there was a program to increase something, I don't know, where people from her class corresponded with people from other classes around the world. And my mother was assigned a gentleman from the Middle East. I want to say Pakistan, but I couldn't swear to that. And they had a really interesting and a really good conversation. And I still have all the letters. And it's really neat to read because he talks about what his life was like. But then at some point, and he sent a picture of himself. So I have a picture of him. I have his name. So I'll give you some extra information I have discovered since then. But at some point, he fell in love with my mother. And she was a very beautiful young woman. So I could understand. And she's very intelligent. So I'm sure her letters, I don't have copies of her letters. I only have his. But I could understand why he would be enamored with her. And I will by now have shown a picture of my mother, at least her color guard picture. I don't have a lot of I have all of her pictures from when she was younger, but the color guard one is like the only one I have like saved on the computer. He fell in love with her and he actually proposed marriage multiple times. Like he really was trying to convince her that she needed to marry him and he would take care of her the rest of her life. And she was entirely freaked out by this and stopped writing him. And he continued to write her for months after she stopped writing him, trying to convince her to change her mind. She obviously never did. He sent her postcards of the hotels his family owned and tried desperately to get this woman from America to agree to be his wife. And she was having none of it. I have looked him up. Had she married him, she would be a billionaire because he did very well for himself. And he owns many, many hotels around the world. Or rather, his family does, but he's very high up involved in running them. I did consider reaching out to him when my mother died, just to let him know that she kept his letters, but that she did have a very happy life, and she hoped he did too, and let her know that she had passed. But then I kind of realized, it's been 50 years, 45 years. Let's not. So I never did. I don't know if he knows if she's living or died. I don't know if he ever thinks of her. I don't know if he found some beautiful Middle Eastern woman to marry and was glad that the girl from America he fell in love with never actually said yes. I don't know anything about that side of the story. I just think it's a good side note of my mother. So my mother went to Cal Poly, and she got to her junior year, and somewhere between the age of 20 and 21, she met someone and fell in love. And they both wanted the same things in life, to get married and have children and just live that, it would have been the late 1960s, that traditional life, And this young man came from not necessarily a wealthy family, but a family of means. And while she married him, and she wore a beautiful 1960s dress and has her hair in the little, I don't know how to describe it. It's not really a beehive, but it's like that round, hood thing. She looked absolutely gorgeous. Yes, I have the pictures from their wedding. Yes, I know his name. No, I'm not going to say his name. We're going to call him John, which is not his name. Not even close. No letters in common. But they kind of, I don't know the reasons, but even though his family was fairly affluent and ran in the Hollywood circles, he was putting himself through college. So he and Mom agreed that she would work And while he went through college, and then once he graduated and had a good job, he'd pay for her to finish college. And then once that was done, they would start their family and start having babies. And that was the plan. And one of the things he did, I don't know as a hobby or as a job, I think it was the career he wanted to go into, was to be a pilot. And he had his own little plane. And back then, there used to be a program for the wives of pilots where they could learn to fly a plane at least enough to land it. Like, my mom never got her pilot's license, but she knew how to land a plane. And if something happened to her now ex-husband, but her at the time husband, while they were flying, she knew enough to safely get them on the ground. She also has parachuted out of planes, which, believe me, when I learned this, shocked the hell out of me, because my mother is such a worrywart when it comes to me. And she like wouldn't ride rides at Disneyland and stuff. And of course that's because of stuff that'll come up. But just to me, she seemed like such a safety conscious person. And finding out that she had jumped out of planes and knew how to land them and had this whole, to me, fabulous life with her first husband just blew my mind. I was probably 14 or 15 when I started really realizing what kind of life she had with her first husband. So what happened? Because in a lot of ways they did. They went to parties with his parents, you know, that his parents hosted, with the likes of Burt Reynolds, who in the 60s and 70s was big, and other movie stars from the 60s and 70s. And I have pictures of my mom just like chilling at parties with these people. Because apparently before I came along, she was very cool. It was, you know, the life every perfect little girl in the 60s dreamed of, right? And as a pilot, her husband was going to make enough money to keep them very comfortable. And she could teach until the children came along. And then when they were in school, she could teach and be there with them and just be a housewife, and it would be perfect. And this was everything she wanted. Just two little tiny problems. When her husband graduated, he decided he didn't want kids after all. He was enjoying this life of freedom and wanted to keep it going. And that was, you know, kind of a deal breaker with Mom, but in the 60s you didn't just divorce someone. That wasn't enough reason to divorce someone. However, she then found out that he had cheated on her, I believe multiple times with multiple women. And while that still, in the late 60s, early 70s, wasn't quite enough to divorce someone, like it was, but it wasn't, my mom went ahead and said, nope, I'm not doing this. We're not doing this. So she divorced him. And she moved back home with her parents, which they allowed, although she had to take care of herself. They charged her rent, and she had to make her own money and everything, and they wanted her to move out as quickly as possible so as not to corrupt her siblings, because she was now a used woman that no man would ever want. Her father told her that. My grandpa wasn't perfect. I adored my grandpa, but I am well aware that the grandpa I knew is not the dad my mother knew. And he changed as he got older, but that's pretty harsh. But she did it. And she got a job working at a bank. And I'm skipping like around a little bit because I'm trying to condense this into a story I can actually tell in a reasonable time period. But eventually, she got a job at a bank. And on her very first day alone, working as a teller, a gentleman came in. Now, Mom was very particular about doing everything right, just like me. I'm pretty sure she had OCD. And she had been taught, you always ask for ID before any transaction. And this man, when she asked for his ID, absolutely lost his mind and said no young chit of a girl, C-H-I-T, chit, needed to see his ID at a bank that he had been banking at for longer than she had been alive. And he was making quite a fuss in the lobby, and my mom was like, what do I do with this? And her manager came out and said, don't worry, Donna. This is Mr. Beasley. He's good. When he comes in, you don't have to ask for his ID. And Mom was like, okay, we'll go with that. But she never forgot it because it was her first day on the job and it was a little bit traumatic for her. Kind of understandable. Remember this guy, he comes back later. So Mom worked and she never did finish college, but she did make enough money to move out. And she got an apartment with her middle sister when she moved out. And the two lived pretty happily together. I mean, knowing them as I know them now, I'm kind of like, I bet there were some issues. But on the other hand, knowing my mom as I know her, I don't think they were very heavy. At some point in all of this, my mom met and fell in love with someone else. I know nothing about this story. Well, not nothing. I know two things about this man. My mom married him. And they moved in next door, or I don't know. My mom married him, and then she found out she was not his only wife. He had a whole nother family. And my mom was humiliated and embarrassed, and immediately moved out and moved into her own apartment, which was right next to her middle sister, who either had recently married or was about to marry my uncle. And this guy that had married her showed up on her doorstep one day and just started banging on the door. Like, come out, we're talking. And Mom was scared. I mean, I think rightfully so. Like, she realized she didn't know anything about this guy. And I don't know anything about their courtship or their marriage. She destroyed every picture of him. I have one picture of her sitting on the lap of someone who isn't her first husband. And I think it's him, but I don't know for sure. And it's very grainy and it's very fuzzy. I don't even know his name. She just wouldn't talk about it. But the one story I got out is he came to get her and would not allow him access to her, and blocked his way and threatened him and told him to get out, and scared him bad enough that he did. My Uncle Danny at the time was fresh out of the military, so he was quite intimidating. My mom was his sister, and he was a Southern boy from Mississippi. He believed in family, he believed in treating ladies right, and he was righteously horrified that this man had done this to his sister. And Mom said on that day, Uncle Danny quit being her sister's husband and became her brother. And she considered him thus the rest of her life. And I think to an extent that's why we were a lot closer to them than we were to my mom's baby sister. Like, we were really close to my mom's baby sister until she got married, and then she moved like an hour and a half away. But I was always a lot closer to Dan and Aunt Terry's daughter than I was Debbie's daughters. And I feel bad for that now, because I feel like Candace and Chad, especially Chad and I, probably had a lot in common. But they were 2 hours away and I just didn't see them except on holidays. Although, I mean, like, we saw them every holiday. Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, everybody's birthday, and there were 4 grandchildren, 3 sisters, 3 uncles, grandma. Yeah, there were a lot of holidays, so I did see them a lot. But not as much as I saw Danette. And so we were always closer, and we're still closer. And honestly, we're closer in age, so that also has something to do with it. 13 and 16, 19 and 21 are a lot closer in age than 13 and 7, which is how old my youngest aunt's oldest daughter is, or was when I was 13. We're like 5 years apart, 6 years apart, where Danette and I are only 3 years apart. After that, my mom decided she was done. She was done with relationships. She was done with men. She was done. She was just going to live a life. And she did. My mom traveled extensively. She traveled to Hawaii by herself multiple times. She went scuba diving. And while doing so, went spearfishing, where one of her favorite stories to tell me was she caught an octopus and her diving guide just sliced it up and they ate it raw while floating in the ocean. And she'd go up to Oregon to visit her favorite cousin, my Aunt Kathy. Yes, she's my cousin Kathy. She's of my mom's generation. I call her Aunt Kathy. It actually annoys her a little bit that I call her Aunt Kathy, and she will consistently remind me, I am not your aunt. I am your cousin. So I've kind of gotten better about calling her cousin Kathy instead of Aunt Kathy, but in my mind, she's my Aunt Kathy. She's the one whose mother died recently. But yeah, she was the cousin my mother was closest to. And Mom was actually getting ready to move up there because by then, she had gone from a bank teller to a computer programmer for banks in the 1970s. And you may not know much about computers in the 1970s, but they were these big, massive machines that took entire rooms, and you used punch cards to program them and get results out. And Mom taught all of these bigwigs at banks how to use these newfangled computers. She traveled the country doing that, and she was very good at it. And she loved it. She was very happy. So she had kind of decided she was going to move up to live near her favorite cousin, who at this point had a son and was married. And that was going to be that. But all of that changed sometime in early May. As I've mentioned before, my mom's family is massive. All 11 or 12 of my grandpa, my mom's dad's brothers and sisters married all 9 to 12 of my grandmother's brothers and sisters. So there's a lot of double cousins. We have a huge family. The last giant family Christmas or reunion we went to, there was over 200 of us. When you count like generation 1 and then their kids, because they all had multiples, and then their kids, because most of them had multiples. And at this point, me, third generation, we've all had kids, and a lot of us have had multiples. And honestly, some of our kids are about ready to have kids. There's a lot of us. And we were very, very close for a long time until it became unmanageable, and it just kind of... obviously I was closest to my first cousins, Danette, Candace, and Chad. But I also had several second cousins I was very close to, or at least the family tried to make us close. Like, they really wanted Alan and I to be friends because Alan was a smart weirdo too, but Alan was an asshole, so I wanted nothing to do with him, and he was a year younger than me. And then there's Michelle up in Oregon. I really liked her. Tim was only a year older than me. I thought he was the coolest thing on earth, but he thought Danette was the coolest thing on earth. And Danette was mean to me, and so they left me out of games a lot. And then there was Michael, who's like 10 years older than me, but we got along great. So yeah, I have a lot of cousins on my mom's side that I got along with really great as a child. And I do still keep in contact with them. It's not like I don't talk to any of my family. I just don't talk to my dad's family. Well, my dad's immediate family. I talk to his cousins and stuff. I have a lot of family. Too many to keep close contact with, and none of them live near me. But anyways, one of my mom's many, many cousins, Judy, Alan's mom, convinced my mom to go bowling with her One went early evening in May. And I don't know exactly how, because my mom was, I mean, she bowled, but she wasn't a huge bowler. But I guess Judy's team needed a substitute, so she talked my mom into substituting. And it just so happened that there was this gentleman on my Aunt Judy's bowling league who was obsessed with bowling at this time, who somehow Judy had, like, conned him into owing her a date. Yeah, I don't know how that happened, because Judy was not my dad's type. Not at all. Not even a little bit. I don't know the details of that. Dad swears it didn't happen, but Judy swears it did, so okay. Well, this guy was warming up with his team, which included his best friend, who was a very quiet man. And he looked up as this gorgeous woman walks into the bowling alley with Judy. And he looks over at his buddy and he says, "I'm gonna marry that woman." To which his buddy, of course, laughed. And he had Dad write that statement on a napkin. And at some point during the night, Judy realized that Mom and Dad were getting along rather well. They were enjoying talking to each other. They were both incredibly intelligent people. And Mom was perfectly polite, of course, because she was a well-raised, gentle lady. So Judy arranged to have both of them called to the front desk at the same time, saying that the other one had just arranged it. I don't know all of the details, but I know, like, Mom was called up saying a gentleman wished to speak to her, and Dad was called up. I don't know why, but they were both called up. And they get up there, and Dad's like, "So what you need?" And my mom's like, "You called me." And he's like, "No, I didn't." And they instantly realized Judy had arranged this. And my dad said, "Well, since you're here anyways, and Judy's not going to leave me alone until I take her on this date, would you go in her place? I would love to take you out to dinner sometime." And my mom said yes. She didn't expect much of it, but he was a nice guy and she was having a good time. So on June 18th, 1980, my dad took her to this little Italian restaurant in Hollywood. And I've been there several times because for a long time Dad took her there on the anniversary of their first date for years and years. And when I came along, he took me too. And I remember they had these really round wine bottles that had like wicker baskets on the bottom half, and they had them hanging all over the walls. And it was really cool, and I loved it, and people would sign these, and they had all kinds of famous signatures on them. And I really, really wanted one. Like, I didn't drink wine, I was like 5. But I thought these bottles were cool. And we had one for the longest time, and it was written on it, the anniversary of their first date. Which I also thought was really cool because the anniversary of their first date, I remember in a lot of ways easier than I remember their anniversary of their wedding, although that was August 23rd, because their first date was 2 years to the day from when their first and only daughter was born. Their first date was June 18th, 1980. I was born June 18th, 1982. The date went well, even if there was, I think that was one of the few dates that they went on alone. Most of their other dates included a chaperone. You see, my dad had been married before and had a daughter who at this point was like 10, 11. She was born in 69, so she would have been 10 because all this happened before September and her birthday's in September. And my dad was a very, very active dad and often had his daughter with him when he would take my mom on dates. So they were very PG dates because there was a 10-year-old in tow. But that's kind of what happens when you marry a single dad. They got married August 23rd, 1980, and moved into the house my dad had bought from his parents when they retired from California to Arkansas. Editor Bell here. So as I was filming this, I told you to remember the guy from the bank earlier, and then I never went back and explained why. So after my mom and dad were married, they traveled to Arkansas to meet my dad's family because they lived there, and since they got married so quickly, they didn't make it out to the wedding. And when Mom walked into her father-in-law's house, she found the man from the bank who traumatized her on her first day was now her father-in-law. And they did eventually laugh about it, but I always love the fact that my mom's first meeting with her father-in-law was long before she met my dad and was not good. So, anyways, it's another cute story I like in my parents' story. And when my grandma and grandpa would come to California to visit, Grandma would rearrange Mom's kitchen back to how she had it. And that caused some stress. That did not sit well with my mom, who, remember, is where I get my OCD from. But the real shocker, they got married, by the way, in my mother's parents' house in their living room, and they had to get married at 10 in the morning because my dad had to pitch a 2 o'clock softball game. Yeah, Dad pitched a softball game the day they got married. And just to top off it's already a hilarious wedding story, they went to Vegas for their honeymoon, and my mom's parents went with them. I think they even shared a hotel room. So, yeah. I don't think there was much honeymooning going on. But yeah, sure, okay, why not? It's just kind of, at some point you have to laugh. These are the stories you're gonna pass down for generations. They were happy with each other. My mom kept working until I was about 4 or 5 years old, and then I remember my dad and I waiting in an airport, and she was coming down some steps to meet us. And I was so excited to see her, and I ran up and I hugged her and I said, "Mommy, I missed you." And she started crying and said, "Mark, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to leave her." And so that day my mom switched jobs, and I forget if she switched back to Cal Poly at that point or if she went to the office that she hated. I don't remember, but my mom worked until, and I was in daycare until I was in about 2nd or 3rd grade. And then, by then Dad had been a principal for a while, and they had bought a house, and Mom was able to stop working and be a full-time mom. And that didn't, I was in elementary school, but that didn't mean that Mom, sat at home all day and didn't do anything. My mom was a very active parent. She was room mom for every classroom. She chaperoned every trip, much to my chagrin. She was super involved. She also made all of my Halloween costumes. I wish you could see my Rainbow Bright costume. I saw an advertisement on TikTok now, and they're very flat. And if you watch the early Rainbow Bright, her costume was puffy and stood out. Yeah, mine was a perfect replica, complete with padding, so the skirt was floofy, and I had the yellow and rainbow hair. It was the most amazing costume of my life. And whatever I decided I wanted to be, she found a pattern and made the most amazing costumes. I had Snow White, I had a pilgrim because I was obsessed with pilgrims one year. I don't know. When I wanted to be Belle from Beauty and the Beast, but I hated yellow, she made Beauty's dress in shiny pink satin something for me. I mean, she was the perfect mom. She was extremely strict, and behind closed doors, we butted heads a lot. And as I got older, some of the things she said and did as punishments, they crossed a line, and they definitely affected my confidence. But before you think I'm disparaging her, because I do kind of idolize my mom now, it was never my mom's intention. And she didn't do it because of drugs. She didn't do it because she was mean. She didn't do it because she was hateful. There were a couple of reasons. My mom was very, very harsh with me as a teenager and young adult. My mom saw in me parts of herself, the OCD, and she knew that the world was not going to be kind to me if I didn't learn to master it. So she forced me to learn the discipline to control my OCD. And I did, but it was hard. And it affected my mental health, but I was able to do it until I wasn't. And I'd have like mini breakdowns where I just kind of shut down because I couldn't do it anymore, and my life would kind of fall apart, and I'd stop cleaning, and it would just be, my brain would stop. And so mom would come and she would reset my house, and she'd reset me, and I'd be okay for another year or two. And that worked until she died. And then I didn't have someone to help me reset and someone to help restart and get my brain back under control. So that's when I finally reached out to a psychiatrist and got a diagnosis and figured out why I'd have these cycles of ups and downs, and got on medication to control it. So I'm a lot more level now, and I don't, like, I still cycle a little bit, and there's times when I'm a lot more industrious than others, but for the most part, it's under control. There are some aspects of it I would still like to work more on the control of, but it's going to be a lifelong process. But all of my mom's harshness was trying to teach me how to survive in a world that was not designed for me and that I was not designed for. And I think she did this because that's the only way she knew how to survive, because she had the same issues I did. And I wish she had lived long enough for us to have the conversation that there's other options and it doesn't have to be this hard. But she didn't. And that's okay. And the other reason why my mom was extremely harsh, my teenage and early 20s, was she had been in multiple car accidents. Not her fault. She was hit by a truck in a crosswalk. She had been just in several accidents, including one while she was pregnant with me. And that caused some pretty severe back damage, spinal damage. And she had a disc removal surgery when I was about 8 or 9, and it didn't help, it made it worse. So, and later in life, my mom was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So for, I would say, the last 30 years of her life, my mom lived with excruciating pain every day. And she did, this was before like all of the knowledge we now have on the addictive levels of hydrocodone, but my mom recognized that eventually they stopped working as well. So she saved them for either really, really bad days, or when we were going to Disneyland or going on vacations. And she didn't take them every day. And I didn't see her take a lot of Tylenol or aspirin either. She also had thyroid surgery because she had cancer of the thyroid and ended up losing her entire thyroid, which means she was on hormone medication her entire life, and occasionally that got out of whack, and that affects their mood. So I now understand what it's like living with pain every day. And I try to learn from my mom. And I know I get a little snappy on bad days, but I try to not. Especially when we're traveling, I try very, very hard not to take it out on people, because I don't want to do that to her. I don't want to make Wolf hate leaving for trips because he knows I'm going to be a bitch for the hour before we leave and the first 2 hours we're driving. And I'd have to have every McDonald's mapped out because I have IBS. I have tried to learn and do differently. But I understand why my mom was the way she was. It doesn't make all of it okay. But we also had, after my dad died, we had 2 years together, and we spent those 2 years healing wounds and becoming each other's best friend. And she really was my best friend by the time she died, and I was hers. And I stopped being her daughter and became her friend. So all of the crap I went through as a teenager and a young adult doesn't really matter. What matters is how amazing she was, and that she ended up being my best friend, and I understand why she did what she did, even if the method was wrong. So, my mother's birthday was last week. Happy birthday, Mom. I have no regrets with my dad. I told him everything. He knew I idolized him. He knew how much I loved him. He knew everything I ever wanted to say. And my mom knew how much I loved her, and she knew she was my best friend. She knew that I had forgiven her and she had forgiven me, everything we had done to each other. So in that way, we don't have anything left unsaid, but I tried so hard to imitate my dad. I wanted to be him. That's why I became a teacher. And the one thing I regret, my mom would have been so proud to see me graduate with my MBA, because my mom was a businesswoman. And that side of me is all her. My dad was a crap businessman. He was a great teacher, but he sucked at business. It's been 9 years. Happy birthday, Mom. I love you, and I miss you.
Did you eat? You didn't eat. No, you didn't. You're lying to me. Yes, you are. No. Do we need to feed the birds? That's what you want to do? Go feed birds? Okay. They want peanuts? Oh, okay.
That's what she wants.